We've got a fair amount. I'm sure people will trickle in as they're able to. Let's go ahead and get started. It's our April monthly meeting for UOCA. Today we have Justin Lee here from Utah League of Cities and Towns to give us a legal update that we kind of missed at the conference. So I know that you guys are all hoping to get this information. So let me just give you a little information about Justin. He spent 11 years working with 3 different lieutenant governors. He served the past 4 years as director of elections for the state of Utah. I hope he tells us about the time he accidentally tackled the governor. That sounds like an interesting story. But he has a BA in political science from the University of Utah and an MA in political science from Utah State University. Looks like he has 4 kids and a wife, and likes to spend his time traveling, hiking, reading, and performing in plays. So I'll turn the time over to Justin. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me. Yeah, let's start out with the governor story because that one's fun. So this was Governor Herbert, by the way, and if anyone remembers, Governor Herbert was quite the athlete in high school, played football, baseball, basketball. So we were having a staff party and playing flag football. And of course, Governor Herbert was the quarterback for the opposing team. And I counted 7 alligator, and then I rushed him. And when it was 2-touch, it wasn't tackle football or anything. But as I went to touch him, he threw the ball and we got tangled up, and I tackled him and put him on the ground. To Governor Herbert's credit, he didn't even miss a beat. He just stared and watched his pass to make sure it went where he wanted it to. And then he hit me on the back and said, "Good hit," and got up and kept walking. So Governor Herbert was fine with it, but his security detail definitely gave me some dirty looks. And maybe weren't quite as excited about the hit as Governor Herbert was. But I kept my job for several years after, so it worked out all right. But thank you for having me here today. Sorry we couldn't connect in Wendover a few weeks ago. But yeah, I'm going to go over kind of the legislative update. Some of it's going to be kind of high level, just some things that may be of interest, and then some that are going to probably be more specifically of interest to you. But let me see if I can share my screen, and if that'll work. All right, that looks positive. So we'll jump into the slideshow here. So first, some general things about the 2023 session by the numbers. So as always, it lasted 45 days. That's how long it always lasts. That's not a new number. 929 bills were introduced. That is a lot of bills. Of those, 575 bills actually passed. Now that is actually a record. The previous record of 574 bills was I want to say 2018, 2019. But they stuck around just long enough to break the record. It was interesting this year. Normally, session ends at midnight. This year, it actually ended at about 10:30. It got done earlier, and they still got through more bills than they've ever gone through before. And on top of that, a $29.4 billion budget. So there was a lot of money allocated as well. Some big themes that came from the cities this year. We're dealing with a year-round legislature now. But yes, it only lasts 45 days. But between the meetings that we see throughout the interim period when they're not in session, as well as this new entity, if you haven't heard about it, it's called the Unified Economic Opportunity Council. Now what this group is it's chaired by the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate sit on this commission. And then it's made up with cabinet members, and then there's a representative from the Association of Counties. We have a representative from the League of Cities and Towns. It's South Jordan Mayor Don Ramsey is our appointee to this. But they are also looking at a lot of big issues throughout the year, which then turn into sometimes 20 to 30 bills that show up during the session. So we're involved in negotiating on some pretty significant legislation throughout the year now. One of the messages that we really try to hit with with legislators this year is that the state of Utah may have had a budget surplus, but cities didn't. We started off with, we tracked all of the bills that could have had a negative impact on cities from a fiscal perspective. And we were looking at about $118 million, or excuse me, we're looking at about 130, 150, depending even $180 million in expenses that cities were going to be asked to undertake without any kind of help from the state. And we turned that into a net increase in revenue for cities and towns. We got transportation funding, we got some other funding that we'll talk about, but it was a good message. It worked well. Another one with growth, we said a lot, was partner with local government to plan for growth. We know we're the fastest growing state in the nation for the last 10 years. Growth is impacting everything that we do. And with that, there comes a lot of legislators who would like to, make mandates, make new rules, look at different things to impact what that growth looks like. And this year we were able to negotiate a lot of things, working with them, not just fighting off bad legislation. So again, we got a lot of transportation funding. We got some good wins as far as processes that they're going to help us moving forward, and hopefully make some things a little better. And then we got some resources for rural Utah. Local administrative advisor. If you haven't heard about this program, I think I have another slide on it, but I'll just talk about it right now really quickly. Local administrative advisor is a program that came out of discussions with the UEOC, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission I mentioned a second ago. And what this does is for those cities and towns that do not have a city manager or a lot of staff of any sort, we're actually going to be able to hire up to 10 full-time employees, some that will work through the league, some that will work through the associations of government in the various parts of the state, to give resources, trainings, to give knowledge sharing to those cities and towns that don't have a lot of staff. So we were able to secure $1.58 billion there to help with that, and we thought that was a big win for us. So let's talk about our session by the numbers. We tracked 244 bills. That's 45% more bills we tracked in 2023 than we tracked in 2022. Of those, 152 bills passed, 82 failed. That's still a lot of bills that passed. If you're wondering, last year we tracked about 168 total bills. So this year, 152 bills passed. We had almost as many bills passed this year as we tracked, period, in 2022. So it was a big session, a lot of legislation. Not all of it bad, not all of it good, some of it kind of neutral, but there's a lot going on. And again, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the fiscal impact that came from this. Rural Transportation Infrastructure Fund, we got funds that are somewhere around $7.5 million ongoing to help with rural transportation issues, and $43 million one time was put in there. SB 260 is a transportation funding requirements. This is an interesting one. It requires the counties to pass, to implement and pass some transportation funding. It's called the fifth. It's an extra tax that they can impose, but it's a locally imposed tax, not a state imposed tax. But what we were able to do is get a piece of that for cities, whereas previously it was just a county tax. So if a county decides to impose this transportation funding, we're going to get money for cities as well, cities and towns, to help with our transportation needs. There were some serious unfunded mandates. Again, there was 118 million to 150 million in unfunded mandates that we were able to fight off. In this case, we only got about 13.2 million across the state. So it's not just for any one entity of some unfunded mandates, but we got over 105 million. So we came out better than we lost in the revenue section, which doesn't always happen, and that was a good deal for us. I talked about local administrative advisor. We got some additional funding for homeless mitigation. 2.5 million one time. We'd already got 5 million ongoing in the past. And then we were also able to get $4 million to help with some implementation for the land use changes that were a part of a few bills there. So that's the big overview. Here's some key legislation. Again, not all of this is legislation you're necessarily going to care about, but these were big deals. I'm not going to go into all of them in depth, but a lot of things around local land use, development, the way that subdivisions are going to be approved and housing is going to be approved, and some homeless service. Some big things that failed. There was going to be some modifications to public safety retirement. This is one that really never went anywhere. It got out of rules. One of the big reasons is they're looking at making changes to public safety retirement, but not looking at changes to any other public retirement. This one, like I said, never went anywhere, but we expect there to be a lot more discussion around not just public safety retirement, but what the retirement system looks like in general, and finding out a way to reconcile some of the tier 1 and tier 2 issues. And we expect that to be something that does get talked about quite a bit this next legislative session. So stay tuned on modifications to public safety retirement. I'm sure the bill won't be called that again, but public safety retirement is a discussion point. What Representative Gwynn is concerned about it from a retention standpoint. He thinks if we do some things to retirement, that will help us with retention in public safety. We'll see how that one plays out, though. A couple of the other one I'll point out here, Citizen Empowerment Task Force. So this was an interesting bill. It started out as an attorney fee bill, which would have allowed someone who gets into litigation with the city to collect attorney fees if they prevail in the end. And we were able to push back on that one. It turned into a task force that was going to study the issue, and even that one ultimately failed and went away. I do think this is another one we're going to have discussions on this year, that if there's litigation that we find ways for, well, I should say legislators want to find some ways to either collect attorney fees or level the playing field in some instances here. But I think that's another one that we'll be talking about during the interim, giving a little preview of what's coming up. And then we did have a couple of bills that we didn't like, that we opposed and did pass. One of these sand and gravel tax amendments. What this one does is if you have a gravel pit in your city, you will be getting more funding to help with your B&C road funds. If you don't have a gravel pit in your city, you will be giving up some of your sales tax funding to help those cities out that do have a gravel pit in their city is kind of the gist of that bill. The reason we didn't like that, we didn't like the idea of taking funds from one group of municipalities to give them to a group of another municipalities. We agree that if you've got gravel pits, that we need to figure out a way to mitigate that. But we just didn't think this was the right approach to it. That being said, it did pass and the governor signed it. So if you're a gravel pit city, you're going to get some more B&C road funds coming your way. And this last one we'll talk about in a second, SB 271. But we've got a slide on that one. So that's the general overview. I'm going to show you, if you go to ulct.org, we do have our legislative wrap-up document on the website. And I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to show you how to find that on my other screen. Unless it's probably on my same Zoom screen, so I might not be able to show you that really quick. But if you go to ulct.org, click on advocacy. There it is. I had my slides up on the same one. That's why I couldn't show it. So if you go to ulct.org, hover here on advocacy, and go over here to legislative wrap-up. You'll see that we've got the full legislative wrap-up just here on the screen. You can scroll through it. You can see all the bills that passed. And then we do have write-ups on a lot of bills. So if there are things that I don't cover here today, and I may not cover everything, you can go look through the wrap-up document to find out more information. On some of these, we have good summaries. On some of them, we also have links to other documents that go more in depth on some issues. But again, show you one more time, go to ulct.org, hover on advocacy, and you can go over to the legislative wrap up, and that will get you to our big written up wrap up that we did this year. With that, I will jump back to the slideshow. All right, so here we're going to go into some individual bills. If you have questions, feel free to stop me at any time. If I don't know the answer, I can get you the answer later. But just give you some highlights of some bills that you may find interesting. So SB 128, Public Safety Officer Scholarship Program. This one creates a scholarship program for high school graduates who enroll in a law enforcement agency cadet program, seek a degree in a post-secondary program, and after post-certification, commit to a peace officer career for 5 years. So if you know of anyone that's interested in this, in going into public safety to become an officer, then there's a new scholarship that's coming online here in the near future. So that was a good one. That's some good funding to help out in this area. HB 284, this is public library background check requirements. This one's pretty simple, but requires a public library to implement a policy providing for background checks on prospective employees in order to receive state funds. A lot of libraries are already doing background checks. This one just expands that out and requires, if you want to get state funds in your public library, then you need to do background checks on prospective employees. All right, state construction and fire code amendments. This is HB 409. Now, again, this is one of those ones where we don't go into a lot of details, but give you the overall here. But repeals tall wood buildings of Mass Timber Construction Incorporated as part of state construction code, and adopts the 2021 edition of the International Fire Code with amendments, and adopts and amends certain National Fire Protection Association codes and standards. This is one of those ones where unfortunately we're not experts in everything, and so I can't tell you a lot of the specific details on this one. But HB 409 is one to look at if you have questions. Also, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us, and we can find the answer for you, or find someone who does know the answer on this one. This is another big one. This is building code revisions, HB 532. I won't even read through all that unless you can't see it. Then maybe I guess I will. For those of you who may not have the camera on. But adopt statewide amendments, and the International Code Council 21 edition of International Building Code, International Residential Code with certain appendices, International Plumbing Code, Mechanical Code, Fuel Gas Code, International Energy Conservation Code, Internal Existing Building Code, and International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. So again, 532 building code revisions, adopting a lot of those international codes. Again, if you have questions on this one, if there's something specific you're looking at, you can always reach out to us, and we can try to get you the right answer about any questions there. HB 131 is the vaccine passport prohibition bill. This is an interesting bill. This bill came out last year and ultimately did not pass. Came back again this year and didn't have the same level of, I think, either support or opposition as we saw last year. But it makes it unlawful for a place of public accommodation to discriminate against an individual based on the individual's immunity status. So this one's going to prohibit a governmental entity from acquiring proof of immunity status, makes it unlawful discrimination for an employer to require proof of immunity status, and prohibits a governmental entity or employer from requiring an individual to receive a vaccine. So that's Vaccine Passports Amendment. Basically can't discriminate on vaccination status after this bill goes into effect. This is SB 271, home ownership requirements. So this is one of those ones that we opposed. What this one does, it bolsters private property rights by prohibiting a county or municipal legislative body from adopting or enforcing a land use regulation that regulates co-owned homes differently from other residential units. So the genesis of this bill is there are, different than Airbnb or VRBO or some of those, what this does is it's sort of like a timeshare, but you basically go in and buy a property with, 9 of your best friends who you may or may not know. And then you use the home in different parts of the year. There's some businesses that are popping up around this. So they're a co-owned home, but in a lot of ways, you don't have the same people in and out all the time. So some of the questions and concerns people have with short-term rentals, for example, also come into play with some of these co-owned homes. And so there have been some cities who have tried to regulate that, and this one would say you can't regulate it just based on it being a co-owned home, differently than you could from any other residential unit or a home owned by an LLC or a corporation or something to that effect. So this one did pass. We opposed it, but this one is in effect. HB 499 homeless service amendments. This one is not going to have as big of an impact this year as it will next year. But what it does is it's clarified some of the things around homeless policy. One, it's done a clarification of winter response plans and expansion to second-class counties for the winters of 2024-25 and 2025-26. So this next winter, even though it's snowing outside and it feels like we're still in winter, next year is the winter of 2023-2024. So if you're in a second-class county, there won't be any changes next winter, but the following year, there's going to be an expansion of winter response plans. There's an implementation of a code blue in counties of the first through fourth class. Basically, that says when the temperature gets below a certain threshold, that there are certain requirements that can go into effect. You can expand some of the amounts of people that can be inside a building. You can change some things when it gets so cold that we need to get people off the street as fast as possible. And then there's some modifications to the Shelter City Mitigation Fund. We got some additional funding for that, but then cities and counties will be putting some additional money into that one as well, for those cities who have a homeless shelter. This really, again, doesn't change anything this next year, but it will kick more into effect again in 2024, 2025. So second-class counties are going to have some work to do starting next year. And then this one, really just telling people about this one because it's pretty cool. But SB 185 provides requirements and funding to establish the Utah Trail Network. So basically what they've done is they put in $45 million to create the Active Transportation Investment Fund. They're calling it the ATIF. But there's going to be a lot more funds to connect trails, to make better trails, to design trails. So this one's just cool, and we're just telling people about it, not because there's anything you necessarily need to worry about with it, but there's a lot more funding out there to establish more trails. So if you're into trails, this is a good one. So I have a few bills I want to talk about that we need to look at going forward. But are there any questions on anything we've talked about so far? And if not, that's great. We'll jump on a couple that I do want to put on your radar that could come up in the future. HB 538 is a water bill, water usage amendments, and it did it had several iterations of this bill. It had several substitutes that showed up over the course of the session. Ultimately failed, didn't go anywhere in the Senate, even though it passed the House. But it prohibited watering during the shoulder season. So there's a lot of I think details around that and some specifics in the bill that clarified, yes, if it's brand new turf, you can water it, for example, or you can water for agricultural purposes. But basically said you can't water your lawns during the shoulder season, which was defined as October through April. Then what it did was it authorized fines. So basically a city could decide that they wanted to fine people who did water during the shoulder season. So authorized fines, $45 for the first citation, $90 for the second citation. Again, this bill did not pass. You don't need to go out and start citing people, fining them just yet. But we do expect there to be discussions around what watering during shoulder seasons, when we can water, how much we can water, and there may be there wasn't this year, but there may be some appetite next legislative session to get a little bit more punitive with those fines. That being said, if it keeps snowing this way, we may not have as much water discussion, and we may have flood mitigation discussion more next year. But this is one that could certainly come back. And then for those of you who deal with short-term rentals, nothing happened basically this year when it came to short-term rentals. There was a lot of discussion during the interim. There was a lot of discussion during the legislative session around how to deal with short-term rentals, better ways to enforce people who aren't complying, but ultimately nothing happened. So we're in the exact same place as we were before the legislative session when it came to short-term rentals. This is another one I do expect to discuss throughout the interim. We would certainly like some clarification on enforcement and ways to deal with that. Obviously, those people who have short-term rentals, and there's more and more larger corporations. There's more and more people who are buying these en masse, and they really don't want anything to change. It's working out well for them right now. But we do expect there to be additional discussions around short-term rentals this year. But as we are right now, nothing is different. So with that, that's only a half hour, but that's the update on the key legislation. So happy to take questions or if there's anything we didn't talk about to talk about those things.
So feel free to unmute yourself or post in the chat and I'll read it if anyone has any questions. I just want to know if an officer has an opinion or wants to give feedback regarding a specific bill, who would be the best person to contact? Like, are you guys wanting to know feedback from us?
Yeah, absolutely. We want feedback from anybody that can give it, and particularly as you're the ones on the ground ultimately enforcing what some of these laws look like. You see legislation that is one problematic. You say this just doesn't work or doesn't make sense, or two, you say this is really good. We like this. We absolutely want feedback. I'm probably your best point of contact there. Anybody on the league staff can take contact. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Alternatively, if there are issues that you think we just need to clean up, there's something that's not working now and you would like us to tackle it. We're jumping into the interim session, the interim period, and we could talk to legislators. We can work it through interim committees. But if there's things you think should be cleaned up, then we're more than happy to jump on that.
Also, would you mind emailing me your slides in case anyone wants those and I can make sure they get distributed?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'll get those over to you right after this.
Thanks. Anybody else with questions? I'm surprised. I thought we'd have some more questions.
That's right. Well, once I send out the slide deck, if people have questions, you can always reach out then too.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up if nobody has any questions. Thank you, Justin, so much for coming and chatting with us.
Yep, you bet. Thank you. And everyone stay safe and warm out there.
Thanks.